Hi, I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. Well, I've got the porch about done. Took some time off. It's sealed up. I don't have animals getting in the upstairs anymore, at least I'm pretty sure not. But push comes to shove, if I need to, I'll do more stuff. But right now, I want to get the welder out here from the garage. And I'm talking about the big Miller welder. So, to bring out the welder, I have this extension cord that I made. Probably saw the video. If not, you can go back and look for it. I'm going to put another 4-prong plug on the cord for the welder. Just to be sure I got everything on the up and up. I want to have all the cords in the workshop match. In other words, ground lugs always have the same color wire. The neutral has the same color wire, which is going to be white. Ground's going to be green. Then there's going to be a red and a black. And I want to have the red and the black always hooked up in the same orientation. Now, on 3-phase, you really want to do that because that makes the motors turn the same direction in the building. You know, clockwise, counterclockwise. But if push comes to shove and I end up having to go with 3-phase, I have to rewire the building anyway, so it doesn't much matter. These can work for 3-phase plugs. Not happily, but they work for 3-phase plugs. And I'd rather not have to go 3-phase because that's a whole lot of time, effort, and money, and I would rather have a 3-phase conversion. Tonight, I'm going to take this plug apart, make sure I get the orientation right on the wires. I'm going to make a recording of that. I actually have the recording of it somewhere, but I just don't want to look for it. So that I can say, okay, all the plugs are going to go together like this. Because I've got a planer and an air compressor and several other larger pieces of equipment that have to have a plug like this. And the plugs are rather inexpensive. They're about 15-20 bucks. So that way I'll be able to plug everything into one outlet or 2 outlets anywhere around the building. Because I want to have 4-prong outlets on each one of the 4 walls. That way I'll be able to move the welder where I need it, or the radial arm saw where I need it, or the planer where I need it. So that's what I want to do. In the meantime, I discovered a few interesting things about this welder. I washed it off for one thing. It had a lot of garage junk on it. I didn't get anything below the top and the front face here so I could read the numbers. A gentleman had a welder very similar to this one, a little bit older. That serial number was 5175, and this one is 7171. So this one is a little bit newer than his. His has an inset along the edges of the welder cabinet. Same voltage, same amperage, same everything. Even the same dial. His father inherited it from his grandfather. His grandfather got it somewhere in the late 1930s. So this one's probably 30 sometime, 1938, 39. Maybe it goes as far as 1940. So this is a rather old welder, seeing as how that would put it 85 years if it was made in 1940. Made just a little bit before I was born. Still works fine. I don't have any problem with it. Stick weld does fine. One of the things that they mentioned in the comments on the Reddit channel, which take that for what it's worth, they said it was probably first used with bare rod. And back when I was a kid, I would have been 13, 14 years old, before I bought my first welder, we used to have to go out to a guy out on US 27, and he was just south end of town. He had a little shop there, and he had a welder, and very similar to this one. And his father came out and was watching us as he welded up something for my go-kart. And the guy who was doing the welding said, yeah, Dad would have done this if he'd given him a little time to get his hand in. He says, yeah, I could probably weld that. We used to weld them with bare rod. And I said, how'd you do that? He says, coat hangers, anything. You just weld it. And on Reddit, they said that when they first started putting coating on rods, it was just a coating to put flux into the weld, and it wasn't very solid. It would break off. And even today, welding rod, if you leave it out where it gets wet, the flux will break right off of it. But he said they used to dip the rod before you welded it. You dipped it in the flux, and the flux kept it from having quite as much porosity as you got with just using straight wire, because the flux caused the impurities to float up to the top of the weld bead. But I just thought, wouldn't it be interesting to try and weld without flux on a rod, just to see how it would work? I'm almost to the age of that guy that was telling me that he used to do it with flux, without flux on the rod. And I think that would be an interesting experiment, just to see how it worked. And before I do that, I want to change out this. I want to put a plug on it like this one. That way everything out here in the shop will be wired up the same way. And I've marked this plug so that I can tell which wire is what. The plug is marked on the inside. This is the ground lug. This is the white wire. I said X is going to be black and Y is going to be red. And I marked it on the outside of the junction box. Now, with a single phase 220 circuit, it's not as important to know which wire is what. With a single phase 220 circuit, it's not as important to know which wire you've got on which lug. It doesn't matter if they swap back and forth, because it really doesn't change much as far as the unit is concerned, as long as you don't swap the green wire with anything else. You don't want to have the ground connected to anything else other than the green lug, and you don't want to have the white lug connected to anything other than the white lug. Now, the reason for that is the X and Y are all the same phase. Doesn't change anything if you flip them in a single phase circuit. In a three-phase circuit, if you flip those two wires, the polarity of the unit that you're plugging into it is flipped. So a motor on a grinder, if you take it from a circuit that's wired X being black and Y being red, and put it on a circuit that Y is black and X is red, then you're going to make the thing run in reverse. On a grinder, that can be a problem. It makes the wheel spin away from you rather than towards you. And I know some people think that grinding wheels should run away from you. No, the grinding wheel always should go down towards the tool rest. You don't want to have it grabbing a hold of something and yanking it out of your hands. Now, when I was working at the foundry and all the other various factories that I worked in, we always tried to keep the phases the same. You know, you marked them out and did them one way. And the reason for that was, when I went to United Technologies plant was built in 1950. And there were very few licensed electricians, because in Branch County, you didn't need a license to be an electrician. You just got to say IR1 and there you were. So when the three-phase was put into the building, when they decided they were going to run big presses and everything, and they bought the building and put the big presses in it and started running power in there, they put in a bank of transformers, 3 separate transformers, one for each phase. Well, that worked okay. Then they got more equipment and they wanted to have more power in there, and rather than take out the 3 single phase 3 single transformers. They left those and they put in another transformer. And they ran power into the building. Now, you're not supposed to have more than one handle in a building that shuts the power off. You know, you always want to be able to say, okay, boom, building's dead. Well, in United Technologies, that was one building. But it was 2 handles. That was bad enough. Then they decided to put it in the anodized plant. Well, the anodized plant was a different building. So they put in a separate transformer for that and hooked it up, and everything was fine. Because they had the main plant hooked up with 2 transformers, 2 handles, and then the anodized plant was a single transformer, single 3-phase transformer, and that had 1 handle. Okay. Well, then somebody decided that they wanted to connect the anodized plant and the main extrusion plant with a breezeway. Basically, it's a way to get stuff from the anodized plant and the extrusion plant over to where the shipping dock was. So they didn't have to load this stuff out in the rain. So they built the building and they put it together, and now we had one building with 3 handles, long before my time. So now, with 3 handles in the building, it was kind of confusing because we had 1 on the south side and 2 on the north side. Okay, one of them ran the anodized plant, the other one ran part of the extrusion plant and the air compressors, and the other one ran the extrusion presses. Well, to make things worse, somebody flipped 2 of the wires. So over in the extrusion plant, you had welders for the north side of the building and welders for the south side of the building. And if you flipped them, the welders made what it did is it took the welder and made it so that the outside of the case was hot. Yeah, not good. So we had the human resources guy, Al Dow, walked out into the plant, and somebody had went because they wanted to get a welder, and the north welder was closer to him than the south welder. So they went over and grabbed the north welder, plugged it in on the south side, and they were welding something up on the number 3 press. So everything was fine. As long as you're just touching the stinger and the ground cable, no worries. As long as you didn't touch the shell of the machine. But Al was walking down the aisle, and the welder sat in the middle of the aisle. So as he walked by, he put his hand on the outside of the welder. He became part of the circuit. Now, as long as he was just touching one part of the circuit, nothing. Like a bird landing on a telephone or on a power line. Doesn't do anything. Well, then he reached over because it was a tight spot, and he grabbed a hold of the track frame on the number 3 press for the runout table. Bam! He got 440 through both arms. Lucky it didn't kill him, because that takes it right past your heart. Just as likely to cause a heart attack as anything. 440 is more than enough to kill you. 50 volts will hurt you real bad. 110 stings. 220 is a real rattle. 440 makes your arm ache for a couple of days. I've had that happen. Having it go across both arms, it's just real lucky he didn't die. But when I went to the plant manager and said, we've got to change these wires around. Called an electrician, and it was going to be a ton of money because they were going to have to go through and rewire all the motors, all the little motors everywhere, because there was a lot of 440 3-phase stuff in the building. Had runout tables, you had fans, you had pumps and gearboxes and just all kinds of things. So they said, okay, we're going to make it so that nobody gets to plug in anything other than a welder that's wired correctly. Never did it. I left soon after that and went to another company, and I'm sure that they never made a change. But every place I went, first thing I checked was polarity on the power, because in the first year you're pretty much on a honeymoon. You know, if I got hired in, it's because they were having trouble. If their old maintenance supervisor was doing everything right, no worries. But if their old supervisor got fired and they called me in, which happened twice, then I had a honeymoon period of about a year that I could pretty much do anything. I said, this has got to be done. So we would go through and check all the phases. Funny thing was, I never found anybody else's plant that had more than one handle on the building or more than a single phase wiring on the different equipment in the building. Must be, after they built the UTC plant, somebody got a little sense and said, okay, we won't do this again. But that was a long story, and I needed to do some wiring on this welder. I want to change that plug. This is a dryer plug. It's got 4 wires on it. I want to have 4-wire twist locks, but I'm going to wire everything with a 30 amp plug on it because everything is less than 30 amps. I don't have to worry about it. I can plug any of my equipment into a 4-wire twist lock outlet and it'll work just fine. But I want to take this off. It's an old wire. I had to, pretty much all of it is covered with heat shrink tubing. Works really nice. It was an old welder and an old cable. It still is an old welder and the cable is still old, but it'll be fine to hook that up so that I can run this welder out here in the shop. I've got a couple of things I want to try. One of them is welding with bare rod, and then I've got some other equipment that I'd like to use. Something that I first used when I was about 14. Got one for Christmas. So when I get this wired up, we'll see if we can strike an arc and make things happen. If you have any suggestions for a new video, questions about today's video, or any of the other videos on the channel, just drop a note in the comments. You know I read them all. Thanks for watching.
This video is not to be viewed by anyone under the age of 13 in the U.S. or 16 in the European Union without the express written permission of the parents or the legal guardians of the underage person. Such written permission must be on file at the local government entity in charge of enforcing the rules and regulations established by the FTC. Anyone violating these terms is admitting by default that they hold harmless the owners and operators of this channel. Any and all questions should be addressed to your local branch of the FTC.